Today we'll be delving into the book Coming Forth by Day, written by the Master Teacher. It is no coincidence that you can take so-called religious practices of today and find exactly where it was copied from in ancient Egypt. In the Islamic religion, the Muslims have what's referred to as the Black Stone, which sits in the east corner of a cube-shaped building, 40 by 40, which they refer to as the Kaaba. And they make a Hajj or pilgrimage to this site to encircle it 7 times in an ancient Egyptian ritual established by the pharaoh Amenhotep, who erected a large cube-shaped granite stone in Karnak to the Egyptian deity Amun, who became Amun-Ra, the sun deity. The priests of Amun would shave off all the hair off their bodies, bald their heads, wear a one-piece seamless white robe, and encircle that cube structure 7 times each day. It is no coincidence that the Arabic word for pyramid is aram, and the white seamless robe worn by the pilgrims in Mecca is called ihram, both of the same root haram, or sacred place, which is also the same word they use as haram, or unlawful. The Kaaba of the Islamic world was built originally by the deity El-Uzza, who is the Egyptian equivalent of Isis or Aset. Their cornerstone, they claim, is a meteorite that fell to earth white as snow, and by the kisses of evil men, their sins entered it and became blackened. This is one of the ridiculous beliefs concerning the marvelous artifacts. They are uncertain as to whether it existed before Cadman Adam, and that Abraham or Abram built on its foundations, or exactly who. Yet millions of believing Muslims each year go there to worship a door and pray to its cube-shaped building, sitting in the center of the city, now called Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Thus, it is no coincidence when I tell you that in the Judaic religion, they too stole things from the Egyptian culture. The 10 Commandments of Leviticus 21-19 of the Bible was taken directly out of the Book of the Dead, from the Declaration of Innocence before the Natiru of the Tribunal, such as, "Thou shalt not kill." This is the exact same thing as, "I have not slain people." Only in the Bible they take the declaration and turn them into commandments from a so-called all-powerful God who has to create laws. Why does your God have to send the commandments, "Thou shalt not steal," which is, by the way, taken from verse 3 of the Declaration of Innocence before the Natiru of the Tribunal, where it says, and I quote, "O nosy who come forth from Kaminu, I have not stolen." Retracing our story, let me speak to you of who you are and your ancient heritage. When I, Amanubi Ruach Patar, speak of retracing our story, not his story, it takes us back to the ancient ones, Tarites, later called Mitzrayim or Egypt, which was also called Khami or Kemet by the ancient ones, now called Egyptians, inhabited by impostors or Maluto Egyptians. Some Sumerians migrated westward under the name Mitzrayim and lived and mixed with the Tarites as Nubans. They became Ham or Ham, Cush from Kish, Egypt from Mitzrayim, Libyan from Foot. These names lock you into biblical history, if you believe and accept the Bible as fact. Kemet is from Ham or Ham, Genesis 5:32, meaning black-skinned. The Greeks called the land of Cush Ethiopia originally, from Aksum. The Arabs called Balad as Sudan, Sudan from Sorda or outer field. The Greeks called Mitzrayim Egypt from Tar or Patar. They all were in the land of Nubia, from the original Nuba, the seat today of Uganda, which encompasses the whole of that continent. We existed on the planet Earth thousands of years before the Bible and Quran. Both of these writings are new information compared to our records kept in hieroglyphs, which are also from on the walls of Central and South America and cuneiform. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Just look at the walls of Sumer in Egypt even today. Look at the faces of the statues in these Americas of the Olmecs, and the truth of these indigenous people of the planet Earth reveals itself to you as Nubans. It's the skin color of the people, not the sands on the shores of the Niles, which the Greeks claimed. The seed of Noah, Utnapishtim, in the Gilgamesh epics, one of the tablets from which the Bible was plagiarized, tells you that Noah's family after the deluge spread across the earth. So some of the Sumerians, as the family of Noah or Noah's sons, moved westward. There they met and mixed with little people, referred to as Tarite or Patarites. Evolution produced from genus Homus to Homo erectus, and then divine intervention of the Nomos or the Natiru produced a superior group of little people called Nubans, whom the family of Noah mixed in with and formed Egypt. The 16 dynasties of Egyptian history made public today is the last of the great kingdoms, not by far the first. Our story, as recorded in the ruins of Egypt today, was the end point of some of our greatness, which was made possible by Khufu removing the immigration law and allowing an invasion of other races to tie into the vine and literally claim to be Egyptians, to the point where they literally replaced the woolly-haired, dark-skinned people's images. They fabricated false replicas that housed the museums and even repainted the artworks in the tomb and antiquated them to make them look authentic, so that you would see what they thought were true images of our ancestors, when in fact they are forgeries, like the faces of Nefertiti which they changed. One of the names that Latin-speaking people, be it Portuguese, Castilian, Spanish, refer to us as the Morenos, which gives you the word Moor. And they borrowed the Greek word niger, Acts 13:1, and it became negra, from the two forms of black, negra the colour and morenos the state. So to them, the original Moors are those of the black olive tone hue, or nub, dark brown, who dwelt in Ham or Kemet and Axum or Ethiopia, and even as far as Al Ghor or Arabia. All of these lands belong to the Nubans or Moors. They will say that Nuba comes from the word gold, when in fact Nuba is dark brown, and Neba in Nubian means gold. The Nubans didn't speak Nubian, they spoke an ancient cuneiform language of Soretic Kushite, Aramic dialects that broke off from the tongue of the beings who visited them from the stars, called Nuwaupu, which later became cuneiform, a Latin word cuneus meaning wedge, merely describing the script, not the spoken language. It gave birth to all of what is called the Semitic languages today. Genesis 11:7 clearly points out that their God spoke a different language from them, for he conversed with his constituents in heaven before coming to earth, and the Quran 44:58 supports this by stating that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad in Muhammad's own tongue, not Allah's. In ancient Sudan, Norba was the name of a deity who came from the skies. The Norbas or Nubans were the original people, and that was their name, not Nubians. They created the Nubian tribes or Nubians by marrying Jalin, also spelt Jalin, by the Gehenna nomadic Pale Arabs who invaded Sudan from the Sinai area along with the Shagia. They mixed in with the Nubans, became the Beja tribe or the Hendendawa or Fuzzy Wuzzy, a mixture of Israel who crossed from the tribe of Judah over and settled along the rivers. They too became Arabicized by the Arab invasions to create a melting pot of Arabicized Nubans who later converted to the Islamic religion. They became known as Nubians and mixed with the Dongala or the Danakil of that area, giving you the variety of races that inhabit Sudan today, and are now called Sudanese or Nubians, mixed brown to light skin, woolly to curly to even straight hair. However, if you look at Abdurrahman al-Mahdi, the son of the Mahdi of Sudan, or his son, Al-Haadi al-Mahdi, who are of the tribes of Dongala, called the Dongala Bega, it is plain to see that they have Nubian features and woolly hair, unlike what they portray as the Sudanese today, who has curly to straight hair and aqualized features, which are Arabicized from pale desert Arab invasions. Down on into Yemen, you had the Sabans, who were the Queen of Sheba's people, and they also were mixed in with the tribes of the sons of Jacob when they broke up into two parts. Israel to the north, ruled by Solomon, and Judah to the south, ruled by Adonijah, both being sons of David, the great king of Israel. Judah to the south, called Judea, had the sons Benjamin, Dan, and the sister Dinah, the 13th tribe. In fact, Yemen is short for Benjamin, meaning son of the right hand, the 8th son of Jacob. Being Sheba was a queen whose name was Makeda, and female deity worship was also related to the moon, while male deity worship was related to the sun. The people of southern Arabia worshipped the moon deity Dina or Dinah. From the female tribe, the Ishtar, Isis, or Aphrodite, the Greeks Bandis, deity of the moon, Arinrod, Celtic deity of the moon, Chandra or Candra in Indian, deity of the moon, Chango, also known as Hengo in China, deity of the moon, Khonsu, Egypt, deity of the moon, and Naja, spirit of the moon, Gleti, the Homi, deity of the moon, Nana Sin, the Sumerian deity of the moon, Isblanku, Mayan deity of the moon, Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, Japanese deity of the moon, Ul, Scottish deity of the moon, and the list of moon worship goes on and on. Many of the cultures switched it from the female to the male, but still it remains moon worship, as in Islam, where Allat, the deity that preceded Allah, was the moon deity and then became Allah, the male deity. The 13th tribe of Israel's Dinah, taken from the ancient Roman deity female Diana, symbol of the star and crescent. It also became the name of the Islamic religion Deen, in recognition of the crescent worship as found at the top of all their mosques. Their calendar is a lunar calendar. All of their rituals of fasting ends with the sighting of the new moon, which is a crescent, and the list goes on. The Islamic religion today comes from these moon worshippers, mixing falsehood with truth. They produce from Millah Ibrahim, the truth, Dinul Muhammad, the worship of the moon deity Allah, whose wife was Alat, and their kids Uzza, Manat. Quran 53:19-20. Question: how did they get to America? Answer: the Nubians walked or travelled westwards. They came over to America. They called it in their Kushite language Atla or Utla, which means to go somewhere for vacation. Atla, pluralized, became Atlan. When the Nubians, who became known as Olmecs, recognized it had broken, split into two parts, North America, Atlan, and South America, Amexem or Hexian, so from Atla, in their language we got Atlan, and the Greeks added the tis, and you get Atlantis. These Nubians set up great empires when they came here. Question: who are the Hyksos? Answer: the Hyksos dynasty were light-skinned mixed Arabs and Greeks with straight hair, and Syrian Phoenicians who were allowed to invade Egypt after Pharaoh Khufu removed the immigration laws, which is why he is held in such great esteem by the Europeans, and even his face is on the shield of the Shriners, a sacred fraternity of higher degrees in the Freemasonry Lodge, whose symbol is a star, crescent, sword, and the face of Khufu. All of their teachings were taken from the Egyptian mysteries and the Moorish doctrine put into symbolism called rites and rituals. These Hyksos invaded and took over Egypt. They were known as the foreign kings or shepherd kings. The sun used to burn their faces red. That's why they were called burnt faces. Thutmose defeated Poppy, the ruler of the Hyksos, which were light-skinned Syrian Phoenician Arabs led into the land. Thus, after the Hyksos invasion, Mitzrayim began being referred to as Aegyptos, meaning land of the burnt faces. Just one of the many Bible names that meant black or burnt, like Cush, Kedar, Hamath, Hebrew and Assyrian tribes. In Aramic Hebrew it's Mitzrayim, and in Ashuric Arabic it's Misr, both from the same root word meaning land of the two rivers. Remember, the use of the word Cam or Kemet for this most holy place is of biblical origin. Many of your black historians and Egyptologists use the word Kemet, having no knowledge that it is of biblical origin, while they attempt to prove that the Bible was copied from Egyptian mysteries, a fact, but a little further research would show that using Kemet confirms the Bible, and this too was a trick to misinform and misguide you. You were taught not to use more, but rather pick up geographical names like Kemet, Egypt, tribal names like Nigerian, Ethiopian, Nubian, or Sudanese, or even use slang names like Afro-American, West Indies, Rastafarians, African Negroes, or use religious names like Muslims, Hebrews, Christians, Camites, or tribal names, Israelites, Ishmaelites, Moabites, Shabazz, or nicknames, Five Percenters, NOI, Ansar Allah, Sunni Muslim, Hebrew Israelite, Nations of Gods on Earth, Israeli Church, Moorish Science Temple, and the likes. We will not be entitled to due process. Tar, which is called Egypt, was a part of one landmass before the continental drift, which produced separate continents. There was no division between America and Africa, and Arabia or Asia, and there was no Red Sea, and there was no such thing as the Middle East. All of that was one landmass called Genan el-Nuba. Later, after the continental drift, this slide became Atlan from Atla, lower part becoming Amexem from Hexian, or Af-American, even Mu from ancient Tarite from water, and to the east you had Sauda or Sudan. All of the people there were what the Latin-speaking historian recorded as Moors. Then you have the Mongolians' land, which begins after the Persian Gulf or Tigris-Euphrates River, which was where the land ended. Our land extended from the shores of California all the way throughout South America, the Caribbean islands to Chile, and all the islands in the South Atlantic Ocean, and extends all the way to New Mexico and as far as the Tigris-Euphrates, which means from the Pacific through to the Atlantic on over, we Moors were the original Olmecs. The true inhabitants of the land were the original Nuwaubians, who became many tribes and many names and tongues. All of the people there were what the Latin-speaking historians recorded as Morenos, Moors. In French, it's Meur. You are Moors because of the historical records worldwide, where you find the Latin word moreno, which means black, but in the sense of supreme balancement, not to be mistaken with negra, which is strictly the colour black, not the state of God before creating the light. The Romans used negra as far back as the New Testament in Acts 13:1, where Simon, one of Jesus' disciples, is being called Niger or nigger. When you look into the Greek, you get niger, and they give the meaning of the word black, as used for the colour in today's dialects derived from the ancient Romans as Latin and Greek. Being all his story is recorded in his languages and not in Arabic or Hebrew. Then, whensoever they made reference to our rights, what we owned and what we did as the civilizers of all Europe, on all of the European coats of arms, you will find us as a race, not being called Negro or African or coloured or Nubian Egyptians or Afro-Americans, but rather Moor, another Greek word for black as melas, from which they get the word melan for melanin. So it is important that we identify with what can be found on documents. If we are to reclaim our rights and the property and riches that belong to us, you must be found somewhere on documents. There are millions of documents that identify you as Moors, not to be mistaken with the Muslims of Morocco, for Islam invaded our countries, and in the 7th century, the people are there as dark-toned olive-skinned and woolly-haired, simply Moors. Not to mention, on this very soil, America, Moors known as Olmecs in pre-Columbian times had sailed over here with Abu Bakr II and Can Mansa Musa using the Guinea and Canary currents, who became the Washita Native American tribes were already here 6,500 years ago. Olive-toned, woolly-haired people, prehistory. That's before the Caucasians began to record their story of time and life and events, which would make us not migrants, but rather indigenous. There are Moors from Africa in bondage. Africa is another trick word. You reside in a place which became known as Africa. The word Africa is derived from the Arabic word given by the Ottoman so-called Arab slave traders as al-faraka, meaning the separation. The root word of al-faraka is faraka, meaning to part, to separate. Originally, Africa was written as A-F-R-I-Y-Q-A-A. Now, it is written as A-F-R-I-Q-A Iyqiyah by Arabs. Their intent was to do exactly what they did: invade our land, spread their religion, and divide us up against ourselves, which is what Islam is doing in America today amongst the descendants of Nubans. They come here under the name Islam and Muslim and introduce us to what their sect they belong to. And we become Shiite, which is broken up into schools, or Ahmadiyya, which is broken up into schools, or Sunni, which is broken up into schools, or Baha'i, Submitters International, or African Islamic Mission, or Ansarullah, or Nation of Islam, which itself breaks up into other sects, Five Percenters, which itself broke up into other sects, Moorish Science Temple, which has broken up into sects. And as you can see, they are in America, and they have us as a people who have had enough problems with Christian invasions, with its many sects and groups and others amongst us, like the Israelites and the Hebrews. To mention the most important, the Arab invasion in America amongst the blacks, as we are called, are causing hate, separation, and even assassination amongst our own. So they succeed in separating Africa against each other, and gave the African Muslims absolutely no financial support when they were dying in need of support, when the Arab world has billions and billions of dollars in oil revenue. They destroyed the Nation of Islam, a multi-million-dollar black organization, by implanted Rawf-Din Muhammad, son of Elijah Muhammad, who has been Arabicized to turn against them and turn them into Bilalians and gradually metamorphosize them into Orthodox Arab Islam. The same with Brother Malcolm X and Siraj Wahaj. They have succeeded in dividing us against ourselves. That's how they separate you, by giving you titles. They don't want you to identify with your real way of life and cultures. If you do, or attempt to, they will call you a cult. You are the original Moors, and there are Moors who were indigenous people of this land from the Olmecs, predating Christ by 3,000 years. You are the original mound builders of this land, the Wushator tribe, the ancient ones. Thus, I, Black Eagle, your pharaoh, Amanubi Ruakpatar, or Naya Malachi Zadok El, speak to you of the ancient Tarites under the African ruler Menes, who brought in the Egyptian dynasty called Egyptians, not to be mistaken with the Maluto Egyptians, from the invasion of Asian mixing in with the Asians and Caucasians who went into 1/4 of Lower Egypt, which is really Upper Egypt, and caused war amongst the African kings. The Africans defeated them under the ruler Menes, and he joined the two lands, Uzit and Nekabit, the old African capital, thus bring about the Egyptian dynasties. After the two lands were joined in one, the Asians tied into the vine with the Africans, causing the appearance of Asian features on the pharaohs. Know that in ancient Egypt there was the great supreme power that made earth, the heavens, the sky, men, women, animals, all that is and all that shall be. And these powers are the powers who gave the name Netta, which became nature, or Mother Nature. We call her Mother Ninti. Egyptologists have translated the word Natiru as gods, which would be equivalent to Elohim, or these beings, or Nephilims, those that fell to earth, or Anunnaki, those who Anu sent down to Ki, earth. Imanu Elish, Tablet 1 of the Sumerians, whom the Egyptians saw as beings with great powers, who, although held to be supernatural, were yet finite and mortal. These human deities were endowed by the Egyptians with love, hatred, and passions of every sort, and many are addressed by more than one title. Osiris alone has 156 titles that are attributed to him, which is not unusual because the Islamic religion, 99 titles are attributed to Allah, an old moon deity of Lower Arabia, held as the highest deity in the cubed-shaped building called the Kaaba. Thus he is called Allah, Tala, Allah the Most High Deity. The Kaaba is a building dressed in black clothes with 359 other idols, along with a dark brown stone surrounded in silver that the Muslims adore and kiss and pray to be called the Black Stone. Now take a look at this. 1. Geb equals the earth deity. 2. Ra equals the sun. 3. El, the source. And all of them together equals Geb, Ra, El, or Gabriel. Gabriel is an Elohim or Natiru who brings revelations of El or Anu down to earth for human beings. He is also known in Sumerian doctrine as the messenger Nusku. They have misguided you up to this day. They, meaning so-called Egyptologists, do not know the home origin or early history of this ancient text, or where did the ancient Book of the Dead originate. I, Amanubi Urakpatar, am here to inform you that the oldest form or edition of the Book of the Dead that they have supplies no information whatsoever as to the period when it was compiled or who it was given to. Or they choose to hide or deny the fact that the ancient Book of the Dead is an inspiration that was given to Ankh-Aten, the son of Amenhotep III, and Tai, from the heavenly one Anu. There are pyramid texts which were inscribed on the walls of the Mir pyramid. It was the source of the modified coffin text, which, as the name implies, was found in the sarcophagus of the deceased. The pyramid text deals more with the spiritual aspect of the deceased, although it mentions the importance of the body being kept in one piece. There were also other texts besides that one that are considered funerary texts from the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead was not the last scroll written. A book called the Book of Breathings was used along with it, or as a supplement to the Book of the Dead, and continued to be used during the Roman era, which was after the reign of Cleopatra VII. Ankh-Aten, who was the pharaoh of Egypt in the 18th dynasty, reigned from 1367 to 1340 BC with his wife Nefertiti, who they gave a facelift to hide her African features. Ankh-Aten was a hermaphrodite, which is a person with both male and female reproductive organs. This can be seen in the Egyptian statues, and yet they will say he suffered from a disorder that would have disabled him from having children. Still others claimed he had a disorder caused by a tumour in the pituitary gland, and others claimed the artist purposely distorted his figure, which portrays Ankh-Aten with female hips and breasts. He was a hermaphrodite and leaned more towards the male gender than the female, or he wouldn't have been able to have children. Most hermaphrodites or hemorphodites are sterile. In fact, an excerpt from an Egyptian book entitled Early Civilization by Jane Chisholm and Anne Millard, page 51, states, "Kings were traditionally made to look strong, masculine and handsome. However, most of Akhenaten's portraits show an almost feminine body with a long face and larger lips, nose and ears. Experts disagree on the reason for this. If his strange shape was the result of an illness, it is unlikely that he would have been able to have children, yet he and Nefertiti had 6. Frolic syndrome is a disease caused by the abnormal function of the hypothalamus or the pituitary gland. The symptoms are obesity, especially in the trunk, underdeveloped sexual organs, small penis and testicles, no body hair, nor deep voice. So as you can see, this disease does not fit the description that is shown in his images. His name was originally Amenhotep, deity of Amen, meaning Amun is satisfied, or Amenophis IV. However, he tried to establish the belief in one supreme Neta, or deity above all others. He changed his name to Ankh-Aten, which is a combination of two words, Ankh meaning symbol of life, and Aten meaning source of all life. Some say Akhenaten meant the glorious spirit of Aten. Ankh-Aten converted everybody to the worship of Aten. He replaced the worship of the Natiru to the worship of Aten only, thus changing what at the time was a politically ran Egypt to what Ankh-Aten deemed a very spiritual environment. What he did was destroy ancient ancestral worship only to change it to a monotheistic belief, meaning there was no more deity worship, no more Osiris, Isis, Horus, no more Anubis, Bast, Thoth, no more Ra or Amun-Ra, or Hathor or Bes. Ankh-Aten switched the capital Thebes to a place called Tel Amara, which is 150 miles south of modern Cairo. Although Ankh-Aten tried to promote the belief in one Neta, it was only truly accepted by those of Tel Amara, and existed for Ankh-Aten a 17-year reign. It is said that when he ascended to the throne, he was crowned on the left bank of the Nile, which was his father's favourite domain. Amenophis III initialized the belief in Aten and had even started building a temple east of the temple of Amun, where his son Akhenaten raised massive statues. It is said that Akhenaten destroyed the religion of Amun, but if you read the same of the hymns that were written by him, you would see that he doesn't take away from the other deities, and in fact gives praise to the various deities that have been recorded by name in the Book of the Dead. At the same time, ultimate praise is given to one specific Netta, just as in the principles and worships of Aten, and how everything was created by him, and the source of everything that exists is made by Aten. Question: why did Akhenaten try to establish the worship of one deity? Answer: because he was taking down all the symbols of Egypt. He got rid of it, giving up Egyptian culture. Question: what made Akhenaten want to worship one deity, Aten, and was it wrong? Answer: no, in the sense that just like the Pope had problems with Martin Luther in the church, the Catholic Church duplicated this Egyptian story to the letter. The priests wanted to keep the old ways, just like the Ansars, when we had 1. polygamy, 2. male dominancy, or the men controlling the women, 3. taking your own responsibilities, and the list goes on and on. The men in the community didn't want to change, even though I was trying to uplift the lives of everyone. This is the same thing. The priesthood couldn't manipulate the women and learned students. The priests wanted to keep the old way because the priests would have lost all their power. Just like the Ansars didn't want to change because the men would have lost male chauvinistic society that Islam taught us. The emirs and the amars wanted to control the people. That's the same thing. We as Nuwaubian Moors give respect to all the Ilahim or Kachina or Anzazi or Ginwins and Umarwe and Shishinka and Anunakai or Natiru. Once the passing of Akhenaten to a higher life or heaven, where the great ship Manjet docked, that is the star Sothis Sirius called Heavens. The priest of Amun started to regain control, and to say the name of Akhenaten was considered heresy by those faithful to the temples of Amun. After Akhenaten's death, Tutankhamun at aged 11 married his sister Ankh-Senamun under the guidance of Ay, the vizier or wizard of Tutankhamun. They were uprooted and moved to Thebes. At this time her father Akhenaten was disgraced and labelled as a heretic. His daughter Ankh-Senpaten married Tutankhamun. Their intentions were to have her succeed the throne, because according to Egyptian customs, the succession to the throne is passed down to the daughter, not the son. Just as the Native Americans, this is because of the gene in the nucleus called mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited only by females, not like the common DNA which is passed to both male and female, and not like the father's upper chromosomes in your genetics from both your parents, 33 1/3 plus 33 1/3 plus 33 1/3, making 100% or the whole you, or 23 plus 23 or 46 chromosomes. The lower is from the mother. The boy king Tutankhamun was placed on the throne after quickly being married to his half-sister. He left Tel Amara and returned to El Amarna with Ay for 4 years of his reign under the order of Horemheb, who had become the vice-regent of Thebes and ordered the boy Tutankhaten to return to Thebes, upon which his name was changed back to Tutankhamun. His wife's name was changed from Ankh-Senpaten to Ankh-Senamun. Question: what happened to Queen Ankh-Senamun and Tutankhamun? Answer: they were married for some time, and Ankh-Senpaten had become pregnant and had a miscarriage twice. Both were daughters, one dying at 5 months, the other at 8 months, meaning they had no heir to the throne to carry on the belief of Aten. At age 19, Tutankhamun was murdered by the high priest Ay because Tutankhamun refused to keep the teachings of the high priests of Ra. Meaning, Tutankhamun gave Ay the impression that he would change the teachings back to the original teachings, yet he continued teaching Ankhenaten's beliefs. After the death of Tutankhamun, the high priest Ay had married his wife's sister Ankh-Senamun. Question: how was the high priest Ay able to kill Tutankhamun? Answer: Easily. I was the advisor of Tutankhamun, and he controlled who came in and left the palace. He controlled the discipline. I was the commoner, so people were afraid of him. The boy was sick, and while sick, one day I came from behind him and struck him in the back of the neck and killed him. He also killed their 2 children. Question. Was the high priest I of the pure seed? Answer. Remember, when you say visor, that's just a way of saying wizard, because they changed the W to a V, because the W is just 2 V's. If you turn it upside down, it becomes an M. Yes, he was of the pure seed. That's the only way you could be in the court. You had to be a high priest of Ra, of the family line. That's why they're having problems now. They changed from the old ways. Not to mention, on the wall of Egypt, you see with the hat of the pharaoh on at Tutankhamun's burial, meaning I had become pharaoh after Tutankhamun's death. Question. Was Ankh-Ensenamun willing to marry I? Answer. No. Ankh-Ensenamun was willing to ruin the family lineage and marry a Hittite king's son, rather than to marry one of her servants. She did this because she knew the Hittites were warriors called Tamahu, a maid people, and she thought they would help her overthrow so she could regain the kingdom back. After pleading for a husband to be sent to her, the Hittite king sent one of his sons, who was a Hittite, who were blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and red-skinned. However, he never made it through the deserts. I took care of him also. He was murdered under I's rule. Soon after, Ankh-Ensenamun was killed also. I's rule didn't last long. He died 3 years after Tutankhamun. Question. What is the Egyptian Book of the Dead? Answer. The Egyptian Book of the Dead is a sacred writing of inspiration filled with prayers, short litanies, and recitations that was recited by your ancient Egyptian ancestors on behalf of their relatives that had passed on to a future life. For the greatest importance is attached to this composition in knowing that these recitals will secure for a deceased an unhindered passage into the next world and enable the deceased to overcome the opposition of disagreeable influences. They had protection from various amulets and spells that enabled them to fight off these malevolent beings. They had spells that would liberate you from certain labors. For instance, the poor person who endured physical labor all his life may have had a spell recited or engraved in something that would liberate him/her from future physical acts. Portions of the Book of the Dead were eventually incorporated into their funeral ceremonies, and the papyrus copy of the Book of the Dead was placed near the sarcophagus in every tomb. Question. Why is it called the Book of the Dead? Answer. Many of the grave or tomb robbers called the scrolls found with the mummies the Dead Man's Book, which became the Book of the Dead. Actually, the Book of the Dead was taken from older texts. There are texts written on the walls of the pyramids which are referred to as the pyramid texts. These texts have been modified because it was feared that they were dangerous because of their hieroglyphics of scorpions, snakes, birds, and humans. However, because of their potential danger, they were replaced with symbols in order to ensure the safety of the deceased pharaoh. In order to preserve the bodies of the dead relatives, various processes of embalming were depending on the status of the deceased and the wealth of the deceased family. There is a period of time where the people were allowed to publicly voice their opinion about the pharaoh. In some cases, if he was found to be unjust or cruel during his ruling, he was denied a decent burial. When one becomes a pharaoh, he is like a link between the gods and man, and must rule justly or receive an eternal mocking after his death. With this in mind, the pharaoh is encouraged to rule justly. A pharaoh that ruled justly and was loved by his people received a royal funeral. His faithful subjects in the entire kingdom offered dirges, a funeral hymn, twice daily. They fasted, refraining from wine, animal flesh, wheat, and sacrifices. All the temples are closed. There are no sacrifices nor celebration festivals given. Mud is placed on their heads weeping. No one bathes or applies any kind of oils, lotions, etc. All clothing is rent or taken off and girdled below the breast in a knot, and all refrain from sexual intercourse. The Egyptians used various embalming processes. One process of embalming was used only by kings, nobles, and those who could afford it. The first step in the process is an incision that was made in the left side above the groin, from which the lungs, stomach, intestines, and liver were removed. These organs were washed in palm wine and then stuffed and placed in canopic jars made from alabaster. The heart is left inside the body to be weighed against the ostrich feather of truth worn by the Egyptian Nertet Ma'at, goddess of truth and justice, the daughter of Ra. The jars that the organs were put into have the 4 sons of Horus in it. They are 1. Happy, guardian of the intestines, represented by a baboon's head, and is under the protection of Nephis. Mesta, the lungs of the deceased, is placed inside with the Nertet Aset or Isis protecting it. 2. Quebsenef, protector of the liver, represented by the falcon head, under the protection of the Nertet Serket. 3. Duamutef, guardian of the stomach, represented by the jackal's head, under the protection of the Nertet Nyet, who also represented the 4 cardinal points. And 4. Imset. The brain was removed through the nostril by an iron rod curved at one end, and set aside to be dried, and is buried with the body. As each step is done, a formula or prayer from the Book of the Dead is recited over the body of the deceased. Once all perishable parts have been removed from the body of the pharaoh would be soaked in a solution of natron for 70 days. Any longer than that would be unlawful. The body had natron crystal packed around the body for 40 days, after which the decaying process would stop, and the body would be ready for wrapping. After the 70-day period, the body is washed and dried carefully. The natron turns the colour of the skin to a greenish grey. The hair and nails stay intact, yet the flesh shrinks. The fleshy areas, such as the fingertips and thighs and back of the legs, are stuffed with a mixture of sweet spices and natron through small vertical incisions which are sewn up afterwards. The nails are also stained with henna. The cavity of the skull is filled with a mixture of sweet spices and powdered plaster and natron. Then, the nostril, through which the brain was removed, is plugged with linen pledgets that have been dipped in an astringent. The breast and stomach are stuffed through the small slit on the side with bitumen and large quantities of gums, spices and natron. After this, the body is ready to be wrapped. A small scarab ring is placed on the pinky finger, which is supposed to confer power on the deceased. The body is covered with unguents, and one side of the 3-inch linen strips were covered with gum. Many of these strips are dipped in water. The hands and feet are wrapped separately before the body is bandaged. Once completed, the body is wrapped, starting from the feet going upwards towards the head, and jewelry and amulets are placed in between the layers. The bandages themselves are held together by small strips, wound at the body at intervals of 6 and 8 inches that are tied in a double knot. Thick plaids of linen are laid under the feet of the mummy to protect it from injury when it is made to stand up. The arms are then folded across the stomach and the embalming process is complete. There were many other artifacts found in the tombs, such as personal things used by the deceased and things that would need once they reached the other side, as various types of food, jewelry, tools for their profession, such as scribes like Annie, who would have tablets and a stylus. In the case of a pharaoh, he may have had a chair and his royal bark or boat used to sail the Nile during his reign, sealed inside the burial along with him, and whatever other materials needed to prepare the deceased to enter a new physical life. As the body is being dried for the 40 to 70-day period, the coffin makers finish the covering that is slightly vaulted and with a human face and beard over it, and a beautiful painted collar to be laid directly over the mummy, and 2 beautiful coffins. This type of burial was given to the royal scribe Annie after his passing. His near friends had expected his departure due to his illness and visited him frequently for long periods of time, alternating. One night his illness took a turn for the worst, and he had passed a little after daybreak. Ani, the royal scribe, had already had a tomb under construction many years before his wife Tutu's passing. She was already laid in the incomplete tomb, and he would join her body in the unfinished tomb. Tutu was from one of the oldest honourable families in Thebes, and a member of the choir of ladies who carried the sistrum and the tambourine for Amun-Ra, and a member of the College of Singers. The scribe Ani was loved by few but respected by all for his integrity and love, and received all the lamentations and praise of a pharaoh, and a lavish burial. He was thought to be with constant communication with the Natiru deities, and his relatives made sure he would be mummified the best way possible. He was a very learnt man of Egypt, and was a tried servant of the pharaoh king who loved him well, but loved Amun-Ra more. All his ancestors were worshippers in the temple of Apis. People who were either of middle or lower class received a less elaborate ceremony in embalming. In some cases the poor person's organs were removed and stuffed, yet he was soaked for a shorter period of time than 70 days, or only his outer skin would be rubbed with natrum and bitumen. She is then wrapped in a shroud, only without the bandages, and placed in a cave, a hole, or buried in a shallow grave in the open desert. In some cases, if the person was in debt, the deceased's burial was in their former house. A portrait mask was placed over the head by the chief embalmer, who wore a jackal mask to represent Anubis, the patron deity of embalmers. There are various translations from the hieroglyphics which have existed in revised editions that have been in use amongst the Egyptians from about 4500 BC to the early centuries of the Christian era. The history of the great body of compositions which form the ancient Book of the Dead of the ancient Egyptians may conveniently be divided into 4 periods. 1. The Heliopolitan version was edited by the priest of the College of Anu. The name Anu is the cuneiform, also the Akkadian and Babylonian name for the Heavenly Father, who to the ancient Egyptians was a physical being with wives and children, and whose other name was An or En. The Arabs call him El-Ali, the 36th attribute meaning the Most High. However, when you put these two words together, Ali and En, you get alien. This Heliopolitan version was based upon a series of texts now lost, and based on hieroglyphic tests done on monuments of the 11th, 12th and 13th dynasty. There is evidence to prove it had passed through a series of revisions or additions as early as the period of the 5th dynasty. This version was known to be written in hieroglyphics. The Heliopolitan version is known from 5 copies which are inscribed upon the walls of the chambers and passages in the pyramids of kings of the 5th and 6th dynasties of Saqqara. Sections of it are found inscribed upon tombs, sarcophagi, coffins, stelae and papyri from the 11th dynasty to about 200 AD. 2. The Theban version was commonly written on papyri in hieroglyphics and was divided into sections or chapters, each of which had its distinct title but no definite place in the series. This version was much used from the 18th to 20th dynasty. 3. A version closely allied to the preceding version, which is found written on papyri in the hieratic character and also in hieroglyphics. In this version, which came into use about the 20th dynasty to the 26th dynasty, the chapters have no fixed order. They are written in lines in the hieratic character, the rubrics, catchwords, and certain names like that of Apep, Apophis, Epep, Iblis, or Shaitan are in red. The names and titles of the deceased are written in perpendicular rows of hieroglyphics. The characters of the handwriting changes in different periods. Within 100 years, apparently, the fine, flowing style disappears and the writing becomes much smaller and is in somewhat cramped. The process of reduction in size continues until the 26th dynasty, about 550 BC, when the small and coarsely written characters are frequently difficult to decipher. 4. The Sate and Ptolemaic version. In this version, at some period preceding the 26th dynasty, the chapters have a fixed and definite order. It seems that a careful revision of the whole work was carried out, and that several alterations of an important nature were made to it. A number of chapters which are not found in the older papyri appear during this period, but these are not necessarily new inventions. It is quite possible that many or most of the additional chapters are nothing more than new editions of extracts from older works. Many copies of this version were written by scribes, and even whole passages are very common. These are only a very few of the many versions or revised copies of the Book of the Dead that were revised, edited and changed in each period. The Books of the Dead written in the hieroglyphic and hieratic characters, which belong to the period of rule of the priest-kings of the Brotherhood of Amun, from a class by themselves, and had relatively little in common with the older versions. Question: what are hieroglyphics? Answer: hieroglyphics is a combination of two Greek words, hieros meaning sacred and glyphos meaning carvings. Hieroglyphics is a system of pictorial writings by drawings of objects, people, things and thoughts that were used by many ancient civilizations, including the Olmecs and the different races coming down from the dwellings in Mesoamerica. The ancient Egyptians were not the only ones to use hieroglyphs. They were also used by the ancient Hopi and Maya Native Americans. These simplified drawings were engraved into clay tablets with a stylus reed. Stylus, a needle-like marking device, and reed, tall slender grass that had a sharp point. There were three types of stylus reeds: a pointed stylus used to scratch, a triangular stylus used by pressing into damp clay, and a wedge-shaped stylus that was the least sharp and was pressed into damp clay. However long before hieroglyphics came into existence, it is a known historical fact that pictorial drawings were the first universal language and the first form of cuneiform. Hieroglyphics come from cuneiform. Cuneiform was the first spoken language on this side of the black hole. Then extra lines or strokes were added to these pictures for thoughts and ideas that could not be conveyed. Then these pictographs were turned sideways and later inscribed with wedge-shaped strokes. Hebrew script from Phoenician all came from cuneiform in the final form. Most strokes were made either horizontally or vertically. Then the final step in the development of cuneiform occurred when the scribes began using symbols phonetically to indicate sounds as well as ideas. For example, the ancient word for arrow, pronounced T, was the same as the word for clay in Sumerian. It was the word teat, or clay, that Mother Ninti used to form Homo sapiens. The scribes used the same sign, a picture of an arrow, to write both words. By giving each sound a phonetic symbol, it was possible to spell out any word in the language. Then came script, next grammar, and afterwards came definitions. The use of phonetic symbols gave writing such flexibility that later Akkadians, Babylonians and Assyrians were able to adapt cuneiform to inscribe their own tongues, which were quite different from each other. Cuneiform was the original language spoken by the Elohim, and it became a written language. Disclosing universal knowledge. Why is knowledge of a certain ancient text so scarce? I, Amanubi Rakpata, am here to disclose this universal knowledge, informing you that it's not that the knowledge is scarce, it's that certain information is only introduced to a certain class of people. So many people are not aware of the existence of sacred readings such as the ancient Book of the Dead. Therefore, when you hear names like Plato and Khalil Gibran, or tablets such as Enuma Elish, Gilgamesh Epics, Atrahasis, Etana, Ishtar and Tamuzi, etc., it is only a select few who are aware of what you're talking about, which leaves the ignorant open to whatever interpretations that a teacher chooses to relay to them, and that's usually from some revised or over-revised version. It's with malicious intent from disagreeable beings that would put out 10 different versions of sacred and holy scripts or tablets, which makes it almost impossible to know what is actually written, or to understand the message that is being conveyed. This is why I have released, coming forth by day, the Book of the Dead. Now you can be aware of yet other ancient tablets and scrolls that have been given to you as a guidance and as a sense of inspiration from your ancestors and descendants. For those of you who are especially interested in your forefathers and mothers, read In Search of Understanding the Nurta, God in You. Although this scroll was written as a guidance and protection for the deceased, it is also a guidance for your life when the heart is to be judged against the feather of truth. Unveiling the Past. I, Amanubi Ruakpata, am of the Natiru human deities, or Elohim Anunnaki, these beings who Anu sent from heaven to key earth. I am coming forth to you to unveil the truth about things that have happened in the past. You must understand one thing. The stories that you read in your Bible did not originate there. The same stories of Cain and Abel, the flood of Noah, etc., can be found in ancient Sumerian tablets such as the Enuma Elish and Gilgamesh epics, which speak of creation and the generation of the Elohim Anunnaki. Tablets that existed thousands of years before the formation of the Bible. It can also be found in the Egyptian mysteries. In fact, stories like these were actually incidents that happened before the Bible era, which were then recorded in your Bible with different names. Most of these names are titles. For instance, the name Adam, pronounced Odom, in the Akkadian tongue, is a title and also a tribe, Genesis 1:27, meaning dark brown of the earth or lifeblood. A name like Adam does not necessarily mean it's talking about the same Adam that is recorded in your scriptures, because there was a different Adam in cuneiform. It's Adama, and means earthling upon each reconstruction and replenishing of the planet Earth. The first tribal beings were called Adamites or Adam. What I mean by each reconstruction and replenishing is that the planet Earth was destroyed more than once. The first Adam and Eve was Apsu, one who existed from the beginning, and Tiamat, maiden of life, who were known to the ancient Egyptians as Nun, deity of the ocean, and Nunet, female deity of the ocean. The second Adam and Eve was Lachmu, deity of war, and Lahamu, lady of battles, and who were known to the ancient Egyptians as Heh, deity of the immeasurable, as in time or Netta of infinity, represented by tadpoles, each of which symbolizes 10,000 years, and Hehet, female deity of the immeasurable. Heh was also called deity of chaos. They were destroyed 17,250,000 years ago by a meteorite shower and sandstorms. The third Adam and Eve was Anshar, foremost of the heavens, and Kishar, foremost of the firmaments, who were known to the ancient Egyptians as Kek, deity of darkness, and Kiket, female deity of darkness. They were destroyed by a second meteorite shower. The fourth Adam and Eve was Zakar, rememberer, and Nekabo, female tribal leader, who you know as Adam, lifeblood, and Eve, Hawa, female living being of the Bible. And the fifth was Noah, whose ancient Sumerian name was Utnapishtim, who became the new Adam. So in reading, you will come to see that some of the Natiru deities mentioned here are equivalent to titles or names of the Anunnaki deities of ancient Sumer. You will even find that some of the titles or names are symbolic of the Elohim mentioned in biblical times. Note, you will find that the ancient Egyptian deity Anubis that is mentioned throughout the Book of the Dead is equivalent to the Angel of Death. He is also referred to as Israel Zadok, whose ancient Sumerian name is Nudimud, founder of the land of Nud or Nod, or Enki, son of Anu, also known as An, the Heavenly One, or who you know as El Elo or Allah or Yahweh, and Id. Enki was once appointed the ruler of Ki, the planet Earth, by his father Anu, who would be the equivalent to Ra, who also appointed him as the Angel of Death. Anu placed upon Enki the taking of the souls of the Adamites and the seed of the Enoshites into his power. Refer to Holy Tablets, Chapter 2. Enki is also the destroyer of all luxuries and the dispenser of all gatherings. The taking of souls was given to Enki because he caused the birth of the Adamites, and no one who passes away can fool him. All the things that you placed such value on will cease upon the arrival of Enki and his priesthood or Anubis priests who perform the rites of transfer from this world to the next. When I refer to ancient Egypt as Al-Kam, it is in connection with Ham, who was one of the triplets born to Utnapishtim, Noah. After the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, Utnapishtim Noah and his family moved into an area that was known as Shinar, also called Sumer. Shinar, meaning plains or flatlands, is mentioned in Genesis 10:10. The cities of Babel, Erech and Calneh are also located in Shinar, which is also identified as the plains of Mesopotamia. Shinar is also called Sumer, meaning flatlands and countries of rivers, and Shumer, meaning plains, flatlands, located in Old Babylon, called Iraq today. The Sumerians came to Sumer and set up a very high advanced civilization and a pictograph cuneiform writing. There, Noah was taught by the elders and afterwards branched out westwards to other areas such as northeast Africa and what is called Egypt today. These ancient Sumerians, who were Homo erectus, were directly taught by the Anunnaki. They learnt about land cultivation, husbandry and how to make beer. Ham's fourth son, Mizraim, is the one who established what is called Egypt today, meaning two lands or Upper and Lower Egypt. The ancient name for Egypt is Tar, later called Al-Kam, which is why you see this name throughout this text. Although ancient Egypt is also named after Ham, as mentioned in Psalms 78:51, it's really in reference to his son Mizraim. Before that time, some of Noah's family migrated into Egypt. Noah was in ancient Sumer and his sons and Ham's sons migrated to other places, settling in different countries and starting different tribes there, where such names as Cush, an Aramaic Hebrew name for Ethiopia, and Mitzrayim, the Aramaic Hebrew word for Egyptians, came from. Emphasizing the present. I must emphasize the present so that when you read this text of the Book of the Dead coming forth by day, you will realize that with a little research you can dispel the myth and prove with facts that the Egyptians did not take much heed to spook gods or ghosts. Their worship of more than one deity was misunderstood as idol worship, when in actuality it was a sign of respect towards nature and their noble descendants. For example, Amun-Ra or Amun-Re, who was the equivalent to the ancient Sumerian deity Marduk and was husband of Mut. Amun-Ra's symbol is the sun, the fire of nature. As for Mut, she was a reflection of Amun-Ra's light. Her symbol, of course, was the moon. Amun-Ra and Mut are symbolically the sun and the moon. They adopted Amun and Mut adopted Khons and Montu, and because of his mother, he was also the deity of the moon. Khons or Kensu's symbol was the falcon head. These beings are human deities that are your descendants and ancestors, not spooks or ghosts. The Egyptians used the word Neta for a male deity and Netert for a female deity, which when you find used throughout the scroll, Amun-Ra is not the actual sun itself, which is 93 million miles from the earth. Acknowledging the greatness of your grandfather Amun-Ra is no different than the Muslims and Christian rites, who both acknowledge this Egyptian Neta, human deity, in whose name they end each prayer. Amin, Quran 23:1 and Revelations 3:14. As for the deity Amun-Ra, which is represented by the sun, he was the same deity who Hagar, who is symbolically known as Hathor, Genesis 16:1, called on when she was stranded in the desert. She is referred to him as El Roy, from the Aramaic Hebrew meaning the source who sees, in El's Holy Torah, Genesis 16:14. It is the same story. Hagar was wandering in the wilderness in search of water for her son. El Roy heard her and sent Gabriel to relieve her stress. In Egypt, Aset, Isis, was distressed in the swamps where she was hiding with her son Horus until he was old enough to avenge his father's death by Nebti Set Seth. He had been stung by a scorpion and his attendants were afraid he would die. Ra or Roy heard the cries of Aset, Isis, requesting assistance for her son. Ra sent Tahuti Thoth to relieve her distress and restore her son's health. The Dictionary of the Deities of the Book of the Dead coming forth by day. The following are a list of the Natiru or Elohim Anunnaki that can be found in the ancient Book of the Dead. Nu or Nun represents the personification as a neta of primeval, relating to earlier ages of the world, dark liquid mass of waters that contained all principles necessary for things of life, from which all human Natiru deities evolved. This Nurta's chief title are Father of the Deities and a Begetter of the Great Company of Deities. He is also referred to as the Abyss, depicted as a seated deity having upon his head a disc and plumes or bent man waist high in water supporting the Menjet solar bark of Amun-Ra. Nut is the female principle of Nu, the female deity of the sky. She is the daughter of Shu, a symbol of Adam's Zakar called breath, air, the same as Ruach, soul, and Tefnut, a symbol of Eve, Nakabu, meaning gases, mother of moisture, same as Nafsa, spirit, and wife of Geb or Seb, her brother. In the cult of the dead, she is closely associated with the belief in a resurrection of the dead. It is she who swallows the sun at shadow hour and gives birth to Ra at the beginning of each day. She is the mother of Osiris, symbolic of Abel and equivalent to Dumuzi. Isis, symbolic of Aklamia and equivalent to Ishtar. Set, symbolic of Cain, and Nephthys, symbolic of Labuda. Nut is depicted with a head of a snake surmounted by a disc, or with the head of a cat. Kefra. Kefra, a rising one, was a form of the rising, or young sun each day, and an incarnation of Father Ra. He is depicted in the form of a man having a beetle for a head. The seat of the deity Kefra was in the boat of the sun. He was also the creator Nurta, that as a scarab or dung beetle rolled the sun across the sky, symbolic of the dung ball that it pushes until it's sometimes twice the size of the beetle itself to nourish its larvae. Ra was the name given to the sun by the Egyptians. Ra was the visible emblem of the Most High Anu, and was regarded as the head Yahweh, meaning he who is who he is, who came down to the planet Earth, and to whom offerings and sacrifices were made daily. He has many forms. One that was the most important was the one where he is seen with a falcon head wearing a solar disk and uraeus. Ra's origin was laid in the waters of Nun, having his eyes and mouth shut. After becoming tired of his inactivity, he climbed from the darkness, showing himself in all his glory as the sun. He is also a creator deity from which the deities that make up the Ennead came into being from his sweat and tears. Shu, the rays, was the sky deity and the second member of the Ennead, or company of deities, of Anu, Heliopolis. He was the firstborn son of Ra, known as the Netta of air and light. One of his forms is a human with an ostrich feather on top of his head or feathers, and holds in his hand the scepters. He is the twin brother of Tefnut. At other times he appears in the form of a man with upraised arms. On his head he has the emblem, and he is often accompanied by the 4 pillars of heaven. Tefnut, the third member of the Ennead. She was the daughter of Ra and the twin sister of Shu. She symbolically as moisture, and in another aspect she seems to personify the power of sunlight. The Nurtat, Deitess Tefnut, and Natiru Shu together guarded the east and west horizon. She is depicted in the form of a woman, usually with the head of a lioness surmounted by a disc. Geb, Seb, or Keb, the 4th member of the Ennead of Anu, was the son of Shu. He was the husband of Nut. Originally he was the deity of the planet Earth and is called both the father of deities and the head of deities. It is he who leads the first steps of the dead into the underworld. This Netta is depicted in human form. Sometimes he has a goose upon his head. In many places he is called the Great Cackler. Usur Osir or Osiris, the sixth member of the Ennead of Anu, was the son of Geb and Nut, and the husband of his sister Aset or Isis, and the father of Ha-Horus, who is equivalent to Tammuz in Sumerian doctrine and Jesus of Christianity and Isa of Islam. He was the pharaoh of Egypt and became ruler of the dead, and was noted as the scribe of the holy offerings of Seb-Nut. Originally, Osiris was in the form of a sun deity, and speaking generally, he may have been said to be represented by the sun after it had appeared to set. He is shown as a deity with green skin, said to represent the fact that he was the nurture of vegetation, governing the death and rebirth of crops, teaching his subjects how to grow barley and brew beer, and later he became the funerary neter. He is shown wearing the white crown of Upper Al-Kam, Egypt. He soon usurped all the neter, becoming father of all the Neteru and immortality. Usa was chosen as the type of what the deceased hoped to become after his body had been mummified. The various forms in which Osiris is depicted are too numerous to be described here, but generally speaking he is represented in the form of a mummy wearing a crown and holding in his hands the emblems of sovereignty and power. Aset Oset Isis, the seventh member of the Ennead of Anu, was the wife of Osiris and the mother of Horus. Isis is equivalent to Ishtar in the Sumerian doctrine, Mary in Christianity, Maya in Buddhism, and Dina and Fatima in Islamic doctrine. Her most common names are the Great Female Deity, the Divine Mother, the Mistress of Charms or Enchantments, and in later times she is called the Mother of the Deities, and the Living One. She was also the knitter of corn and flax and weaving cloth. Once she learned the sacred name of Father Ra, she became the most powerful of all the deities. Ra revealed the name to her after she constructed a serpent arrow from the spittle that fell on the path that he walked upon as he crossed the sky each day. Once completed, the serpent was placed in his path, and as it sensed his approach, it sprang to life and bit Ra in the leg. No one could remedy his pain. So Aset said she could remedy his illness if he would reveal his name, which she did, under the condition that she would only reveal it to her son Ha-Horus. She is usually depicted in the form of a woman with a headdress in the shape of a seat, which is the hieroglyphic that forms her name. The animal she held as sacred was the cow. Therefore she sometimes wears upon her head the horns of this animal, accompanied by plumes and feathers. At one point Isis is identified with the female deity Selkit, Selk or Serk, and she then has upon her head a scorpion, the emblem of the female deity, and then a star is added to her crown. The Bible calls her Ashtaroth. She is, however, most commonly represented as the mother suckling her child Horus, which is known throughout many cultures as Madonna and Child or Jesus and Mary, and figures of her in this aspect are in bronze. Ha-Heru or Horus, the sun deity, who is equivalent to Tammuz, the son of Dumuzi and Ishtar. He was the son of Usir Osiris and Aset Isis, the principal forms of Ha-Horus, the sun deity, which probably represented the sun at various periods of early daylight hours and shadow hours are Heru-Ur, Horus the Great, Heru-Merti, Horus the two eyes, i.e. of the sun and the moon, Heru-Nub, the golden Horus, Heru-Kent-Kat, Heru-Kent-Anma, Horus dwelling in blindness, Heru-Kuti, Horus of the two horizons, which on earth was the Sphinx, Heru-Samtao, Horus the uniter of the north and the south, Heru-Hekenu, Horus of Heken, and Heru-Behutet, Horus of Behutet. Horus appears in Egyptian texts usually as Heru-Pikat or Horus of the field, who afterwards became the avenger of his father Osiris and occupied his throne, as we are told in many places in the Book of the Dead. Nebti, Set, Seth or Sutuk, the eighth member of the Ennead company of the deities of Anu, was son of Geb and Nut, and husband of his sister Nephis. The worship of this deity is exceedingly old, and in the pyramid text he is often mentioned with Horus and the other deities of the Heliopolitan company in terms of reverence. Set was also believed to perform friendly offices for the deceased, and to be a deity of the Seket Aru, or abode of the blessed dead. He is usually depicted in human form with the head of an animal which has not yet been identified. In earlier dynasties he was a beneficent deity, one whose favour was sought after by the living and by the dead. As far back as the 19th dynasty, kings delighted themselves to be called beloved of Set. However, about the 22nd dynasty, it became the fashion to regard this deity as the origin of all evil. His animal mask is thought to be a greyhound and an aardvark, but it is actually a camel with clipped ears. Nepset or Nephis, the last member of the company of deities, or Netiru of Anu. She was the daughter of Geb and Nut, the sister of Usir Osiris and Aset Isis, and the sister and wife of Set. When the solar bark boat rose at the creation of the primeval waters, Nephis occupied a place in his boat with Aset Isis and other deities. As a nature female deity, she either represents the day before the sun appears to rise or after it appears to have set, but no portion of the shadow hours. She is depicted in the form of a woman having upon her head the hieroglyphic which form her name, Lady of the House. She was also known as the protectress of the dead. Anubu Anup, or Anubis, is the equivalent to Enki Nodimud, the son of Anu, of the Sumerian doctrine. He is the son of Usir Osiris and Nephis, and he is the Neter, deity of the dead. Once Usir crossed over, the world of the deceased became his domain. Also another form of Anubis, he was also depicted in the form of a jackal, and the two deities are often confounded. Tahuti or Thoth, who is sometimes compared to Zoser in the Egyptian doctrine, represented the divine intelligence. He is an old creator Neter who hatched the world from an egg. He also sits on the bark of Ra, killing all enemies of Ra as they cross his path. He is the Neter of time and measurement, mathematics, science, and the inventor of writing. He is represented by a baboon or an ibis with a lunar crescent and disc on his head. It is he who writes down all the dead man's actions at judgment. He was the great deity of the air, the earth, sea, and sky. He united in himself the attributes of many deities. Shehat, Neter of writing and scribes, she is also a wife of Tahuti Thoth. Ma'at, the wife of Thoth, was the daughter of Ra, and a very ancient female deity. She seems to have assisted Ta and Khnum in carrying out rightly the work of creation ordered by Thoth. There is no one word that will exactly describe the Egyptian concept of Ma'at, both from a physical and from a moral point of view, but the fundamental idea of the word is straight, and it is clear from the Egyptian text that Ma'at means right, true, truth, real, genuine, upright, righteous, just, steadfast, unalterable, etc. Ma'at, the goddess of the unalterable laws of heaven and the daughter of Ra, is depicted in female form, with the feather emblematic of Ma'at on her head, or with the feather alone for a head and the scepter in one hand. Het Heru or Hathor. Subsequently, a great number of Elohim or Netiru of the same name were developed from her, and these were identified with Isis, Nith, Usaset, and many other deities whose attributes they absorbed. A group of 7 Athors or Hathor is also mentioned, and these appear to have partaken of the nature of what you call good fairies. In one form, Athor or Hathor was the deity of love, beauty, and happiness, and the Greeks identified her with their own Aphrodite. She is often depicted in the form of a woman having disc and horns upon her head, and at times she has the head of a lion surmounted by uraeus. Often she was the form of a cow, the animal sacred to her, and in this form she appears as the deity of the tomb, or Tarsatet. Metert is the personification of that part of the sky wherein the sun appears to rise, and also of that part of it in which he takes his daily course. She is depicted in the form of a cow, along the body of which the 2 arcs of the sun are seen sailing. Net or Neith, the Divine Mother, the Lady of Heaven, the Mistress of the Deities, was one of the most ancient deities of Egypt, and she appears as the mother of Sebek. She is the creatress Nertet and was called the creator of life and sun. She too emerged from the primeval waters and formed the primeval mound light. The first Natiru were created from her voice. This is an attribute shared by Tahuti Thoth. It is she who presides over birth, for she was the first to give birth in the universe, and is the Nertet of wisdom. Like Mehut, she personifies the place in the sky where the sun takes its daily course. In one form, she was the deity of the loom and shuttle. She is depicted in the form of a woman, having upon her head the shuttle or arrows, or she wears the crown and holds the arrows, a bow, and a scepter in her left hand. She also appears in the form of a cow. Nesert, Sekhmet, or Sekhet, was in Memphis the wife of Ptah and the mother of Imhotep. She was the personification of the burning heat of the sun, and as such was the destroyer of the enemies of Ra and Osiris. When Ra was determined to punish the Enoshites with death, he sent Sekhmet, his wrathful eye, to perform the work of vengeance. She is also known as the Lady of the Flame. Illustrative of this aspect of her is the figure wherein she is depicted with the sun's eye for a head. Usually she has the head of a lion surmounted by the sun's disk, round which is an uraeus, and she generally holds a scepter, but sometimes a knife. Amsu or Amsi is one of the most ancient deities of Al-Kam, Egypt. He personified the power of generation, or the reproduction force of nature. He was the father of his own mother, and was identified with Horus the Mighty, or with Horus the Avenger, or his father Un-Nefer or Osiris. The Greeks identify him with the deity Pan. He is depicted usually in the form of a man standing, and he has upon his head the plumes and holds the flail in his right hand, which is raised above his shoulder. Neb-Urcher, a name which originally implied deity of the universe, but which was subsequently given to Osiris, and indicated the deity after the complete reconstruction of his body, which had been hacked to pieces by Nebti or Set. Wenefer-Unefer, a name of Osiris in his capacity of deity and judgment of the dead in the underworld. Some make these words to mean the good being, and others the beautiful hair. Happy is the name of the creator deity of the Nile, who was worshipped in Kemet, Egypt under two forms, i.e. Happy of the South and Happy of the North. He is also one of the suns shown on the canoptic jars. Geographical places in the Book of the Dead. Abtu, the Abydos of the Greeks, the capital of the 8th nome of Upper Egypt. It was the seat of worship of Osiris, and from this fact was also called Pa-User or Busiris, the house of Osiris. Akert, a common name for the abode of the dead. Amenta or Amentet was originally the place where the sun appeared to have set, but subsequently the name was applied to the cemeteries and tombs which were usually built in the stony plateaus and mountains on the western bank of the Nile. Anrutf or Narutf is the section or door of the Taut which lies in the north of Rasta or Rosetia. The meaning of this word is "it never sprouteth." Antes, an unknown locality where a light tower was adored. Anu or Anu with two N's, the Heliopolis city of the sun of the Greeks and the capital of the 13th nome of Lower Egypt. The Hebrews call it On, Genesis 41:45, Aven, Ezekiel 30:17, and Beth Shemesh, Jeremiah 43:13. This last name is an exact translation of the Egyptian Ra, house of the sun, which was also a designation of Anu. The city of Anu seems to have become associated with the worship of the sun in prehistoric times. The deceased made his way to Anu, where souls were joined unto bodies in thousands, and where the blessed dead lived in celestial food forever. Kemenu, i.e. the city of the 8th great cosmic deities. the Hermopolis of the Greek writers, and the metropolis of the fifth nome of Upper Egypt. The old Egyptian name for the city is preserved in its Coptic and Arabic names. Manu, or Manu with two N's, is the name given to the region where the sun gives an appearance of setting, which was believed to be exactly opposite to the district of Becca, where he gave the appearance of the rising in the east. Manu is a synonym of the west, just as Becca is a synonym of the east. Rasta or Rastau, a name given to the passages in the tomb which lead from this world to the other world, originally it designated the cemetery of Abydos only, and its deity was Osiris. Sekhem, the Letropolis of the Greeks and the capital of the Letropolites nome. It was the seat of the worship of Heru-Ur, Horus, the elder, and one of the most important religious centers in Egypt. Sekhet Anru, the field of the Anru plants, was a name originally given to the islands in the delta where the souls of the dead were supposed to live. Here was the abode of the deity Osiris, who bestowed estates in it upon those who had been his followers, and here the beatified dead led a new existence, and regaled themselves upon food of every kind, which was given to them in abundance. Set Amentet, the mountain of the underworld, a common name for the cemetery, which was usually situated in the mountains or desert on the west bank of the Nile. Suten Henen, more correctly Henen-Su, the metropolis of the 12th nome of Upper Egypt, called by the Greeks Heracleopolis Magna. The Hebrews mention the city, Isaiah 34, Hanez, as the representative of Upper Egypt, and in Coptic times it was still of considerable size and importance. Tetet, a name given both to the metropolis of the 9th nome and to the chief city of the 16th nome of Lower Egypt, which is actually Upper Egypt. Duat or Tuat, a common name for the abode of the departed.